Jide Badmus, and I'm an engineer. I'm a poet. Uh, I'm a husband and a father of two daughters. A husband of one wife and a father of two daughters. All right. I was born in Ilorin to a family of four children. My dad and my mom. My dad is from Kwara State, that's Omido to be precise. My mom is from then Oyo State, so she's from Ogbomoso. I think Ogbomoso is still in Oyo State. So I'm the firstborn, two boys, two girls. And, growing up, I tell my friends I really don't remember much of my childhood, but the basics is I'm the first of four children. I have a younger brother. He's also a poet. He's a lawyer. I have two younger sisters, and so one is a quantity surveyor. The other is an accountant. Okay, so I grew up in Ilorin, like I said. Went to Chapel Nursery and Primary School. Then I went to the University of Ilorin Secondary School, where I did my secondary education. Well, I think the notable thing in secondary school is the fact that I won a mathematics scholarship. I think then it was called the National Mathematics Center. So we wrote an exam, and it was on a state level, and I was the top. They picked the top 10. I think I was third overall in well, that was the scholarship I got, which funded my senior secondary education. Even though the scholarship was actually paid for after my SSC, after I had graduated, but at least it covered the whole 3 years. Then I went to the University of Ilorin, as Ilorin, to study electrical engineering. So practically that's my growing up, that's my educational background. I would say growing up, my parents, what we would call then, we would say they're disciplinarians. They're both in the education line. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a town planner. Then at a point too, he lectured at the Polytechnic in Ida, Federal Polytechnic Ida. So, and both of them take education so serious, formal education they take serious. I remember, when I have this kind of discussions and conversations, I like to mention the fact that even to the point of the university level, my dad had professors that were friends that would just check up on me in class. So even before the results are out, so professors are seeing my results and they're like, Jide, what happened there? That kind of a thing. So it wasn't just even primary school, it wasn't just secondary school. Primary school, it was funny. My Chapel Nursery Primary School is adjacent to where my mom teaches, or where she taught. That was Bishop Smith Secondary School. So at times, she would just pop in. From the window, my friends would just say, Jide, your mom is there, or Jide, your dad is there. And so, it was not just go to school, there was real follow-up with what we did. And he also made all of us kind of sit up, and we know that what you want to do, you do it well. You face it and put all your energy, put all your effort, and get something good out of it. So I would say it's almost a cliche for most writers, but I also know to a large extent it is true for many. We tend to say we started writing when we were young, when we were children. But the actual fact is, I actually started writing when I was small. Although at a point too, I kind of, it was natural. There was some sort of break because the awareness was not there. Okay, I started writing, I would write stories, I would draw comics. So I used to sketch then, I would draw comics, after watching a movie, you want to create something you want to create a story, I would draw comics, create conversations, give to my younger ones to read, give to my mom, give to my dad. They were my first audience. Then when family friends come around, our aunties, our uncles, we give them, they read. Sometimes they just tip you, did they want a good story? Take 5 naira, buy Coke, buy sweet, such. So I cannot have my story without actually referring to those times. Because even though I might not be so much aware of what I was doing, it was there. So over time, primary school, secondary school, I was writing stories. And then at a point, I think, you get to the secondary school and you meet friends, then priorities tend to shift, you see new things. It's a bigger society, yes. So you tend to just leave some things behind and you embrace new things. But what was constant, even while it seemed I wasn't writing, was the fact that I was reading. So it made this makes me go back a little bit. The fact that as young as we were, our parents got books for us. So it wasn't just school. You had story books to read. You had, literature books. And because mom and dad also had their own books, at times you're just bored, or I'm just bored, and I'm going through the house and I see a book and I just pick it. So there are books I read when I was so small. I might not know, but at least I was practicing to read. And that was the constant thing. I read all through my childhood. So when it seemed I stopped writing those stories or drawing those comics, I was reading. I remember the points when I think we finished SSC, we finished secondary school. I have this friend, I call him my best friend, Femi Babalola, and we decided to join a book club together. And I can tell you that in no time, we could say we finished all the books in that, because this is what we do. This is the rule. You take a book and take it for 2 days. You pay, read for 2 days, and return. So if you take 2 books, I think you can do 3 days and return. So I'll take 2 books for 3 days. It will take 2 books for 3 days or so. Maybe we'll do it over the weekend. So by the time I'm done with the 2 books or 3 books I'm reading, I swap with him. He reads mine, I read his, and we return. So you get, for the price of 3 books, we are reading 6 books. And in no time, we almost exhausted what the book club had. So that's the kind of love I had for reading. Some of my friends still make fun of me or laugh at me that I read so much of foreign, especially when it comes to fiction. But then that was what was so much available. Yes, I would say I started reading Pesetas series in primary school. But over time, I found out Nick Carter. Nick Carter was also in volume, more like the Pesetas, but a foreign. So I got interested in, it's more detective, more mystery. Nick Carter, Orc, the Orc series. Then I found James at the Chase. After James at the Chase, I just did away with anything Nigerian fiction. That's the funny thing. Then I found Robert Ludlum, then Tom Clancy, Dean Koontz, Stephen King, and that's. So I just went. I'm more like into the book or into the world of books and movies anyway. So I'm more introvert. I hardly go out. I usually find reasons not to go out, not to go to parties. You get. a friend calls, Jide, I'm looking for the next excuse not to. There are times, even till now, I remember I was at Ede for like 3 years between 2019 or 2019 and 2021. And there was this time during the project, one engineer came around to do his own installation. So after the work, it was like, guys, let's hang out. so no problem. We all exchanged numbers. I think we said 8 o'clock. When it was 7:30, I'm like, can I go to this place? Can I go to this place? I hardly go out that much. I think they started calling. I didn't know what to say. I can't remember the excuse I gave, but for more than 2 weeks, they taunted me because I refused to go out. The other engineers, when I get back to work, they started taunting me. But it was funny because also those who went out that day, they were the two of them. Yeah, they socialize, but they don't drink. The other guy that invited us was expecting that kind of environment where you have drinks, and so he offered them drinks, and they were like, oh, what do you want? They were throwing it back at him. What do you also want? No, make your order weed. So the whole scenario was just so funny because one of the guys that was usually the more outspoken that we thought would be like, I can drink anything. At that day, at the end of the day, I ended up saying, give me crest. So at least that saved me a bit of, they were not just laughing at me that I didn't come out. The old joke now switched to him that you add 10 bottles of Guinness and all that. So just to say that I'm so much an introverted person, yes, I still refer to myself as timid and shy, but I know to a very large extent I've grown out of it. I think when I talk much, you should know that I'm very close to that person, or I'm free with that person. I am so much reserved. I rarely talk. If I'm in a gathering, even if I have things to say, I rarely offer myself, except they'll point at me that, sorry, what's your opinion on this? Then you'll be surprised that I actually have an opinion. So what gets me excited when I talk about books, when I talk about writing, when I talk about movies too, when I talk about football. When I talk about football, those things get me. You see another side of me. So when I see someone who has those passions too, I flow freely, and you doubt if I tell you that I'm an introvert. So, but I also say I grew out of it. I think at times growth, when you age, also helps with that. Environment could also be a big factor. I remembered, okay, my first, apart from maybe primary school where you do debating, quiz and debates and all that, literary groups, I'm not sure at any time did I say I stand in front of people to present anything or to say, to have any form of presentation. I run away from dramas, stage plays and all that, from school to church. But at a point, I think during my university years, I was in the youth choir in church. At a point, I was even the youth choir leader. So that's also one part that most people don't know about me. And because I also compose songs, I write songs. And being the youth choir leader, we needed songs too, and I like things original. So yeah, we wanted to hold a concert. So if we had like 10 songs, we would have like 5 from the popular artists out there. You sing a Kirk Franklin, you sing, but we would have at least 5 that are original. So maybe out of the 5, I had 3 of them written by me and taught to the choir. So at this concert, I had to actually be the lead singer for one of the songs, and he included a rap. So, so I would say that was actually like the first vivid experience of being on stage and having to present something, because I don't dance. I can't dance. I believe I can't dance. So, and if you have to lead a song, you also have to at least, show that kind of and shake body, like they will say. And I had to rap. So that basically was when I had the first experience on stage, kind of, or talking to an audience or performing in front of an audience. So I would say, as an adult, I encountered writing. I decided I would really go and concentrate on writing, sometimes in my 100 level. And this was the cause for it. Well, like I said, I was more someone who read novels, and I saw most of Nigerian fiction then as academic. Why? Because we had to read them for exam. We had to read them but I only did literature in my junior secondary school. I read Cyprian Quincy. I read we read Drummer Boy. We read Passport of Malamilia. I read The Lion and the Jewel by Wole Soyinka. I read Time Changes Yesterday. I can't remember the Incorruptible Judge. That's Agbalo Mary. I still remember that vividly. So I think those are the ones that quickly came to mind. So, like I was saying, I see those texts more as academic, and so I rarely read them for relaxation or entertainment, as it were. So, but my inspiration, my decision to actually write did not come from any of these influences. It's funny, but it came from my younger brother. Okay, I was in engineering, he was in law. So we got admission at the same time. I'm just a year older. So, and we are 2 different personalities. I'm very introverted, he's very extroverted. So we are extreme poles. The funny thing is, I told you I got mathematics scholarship in secondary school. I think that was the only time people even got to know me a little. So even my classmates, you could find 3, 4, 5 people that don't know me or don't know my name. That's talking of the whole block. But for him, the old school, the old school knows him. There was a time he came to my class, and so he was on his way out. I usually sit in front most of my classes. So this is the door. I'm sitting next to the door, the front desk. And he was going out after playing with almost everybody. He was going out, then he greeted me, we shook, and he went out. And someone was like, you know him too? And I'm like, it's my younger brother. It's my younger brother. That's how popular he is. And so, in law faculty, he started writing poetry when he started law. And I think he was in charge, or he was part of they had a, what do you call this now, notice board. So they post interviews, they post poems, and so he's a constant writer for them. And I would read his poems, and he rhymes a lot, and I'll be like, if this boy can write this thing, and he hardly reads, and that's the reality. He hardly reads. He hardly stays. He cannot stay at a spot for 15 minutes. So even when we are at home, he's not in one spot. I can stay at a spot for like an hour. Maybe I'm reading, maybe I'm listening to, but he cannot stay in the spot. I'm not sure he can sit still for 5 minutes. He's out, he's up and doing. So I'm like, this guy doesn't read. He's not as calm as I am. So I wonder when he actually has the time to, ruminate and think and come out with stuff like this. So it was actually that inspiration, that push that made me sit down one day and I'm like, even at all those points, I did not remember that, I used to write stories. Yes, as an introvert, a lot of introverts would attest to this. We write a lot of stories in our head. We have wild imaginations. So I know I have story ideas as far back as even primary 6 that I just sit down and it's as if I'm fantasizing and creating characters in my head. I'm replaying something that happened, at school, and I'm looking at scenarios. What if it had gone this way? You get, I'm recreating scenes. So, but it was in 100 level, seeing what he was writing, what he was posting, that I feel, okay, I can do this. So I felt maybe because he was a literature student in senior secondary school, that means you go more in depth, you read more books and all that. You are tasked to even do some writings, which I didn't do because it was just junior secondary school. So it's more lack of comprehension, read the comprehension, answer, you get. So I guess maybe that piqued the interest in him and he started writing. So one day I just sat down. I could remember it was 2000 and okay, so my 100 level was actually 1999, but it was 2000, 2001, one day. I actually started poetry. I sat down and said, okay, let me write. And that day I wrote 2 poems. They were love poems. I wish I can still find this. I can't find them, but they were love poems. And I wrote them, I wrote my name, I wrote the date. It was a white A4 paper, so one in front, one at the back. And somehow, after that day, I forgot about it. I didn't even remember I wrote anything. But the funny thing, a year after, exactly a year after, I was cleaning the room. And somehow, somewhere, I found the paper. The only thing that made me realize it was a full year after was because I wrote the date. And I read, and I'm like, Jide, you wrote this? When I was writing it, I didn't know what I was writing. But reading it a year later, I'm like, how did I think about this? How did I write this? I couldn't even tell myself, except for the fact that my name was under. If I had seen it with someone else's name that day, I wouldn't have even imagined I wrote it. And that was how I just picked up. And I just continued writing that. Okay, if I could do this last year. So I think all of the past, all of the creative instincts that I had just started coming out. All of the deposits of reading, just started pouring out into writing. Writing is a serious job. I can feel the pains of writer when people at times just tear down or criticize what has been written, especially people who don't understand the process or what goes into writing. And engineering on its own is ethic. Is ethic. Well, one thing that helped me in the past is the fact that I'm into the engineering I'm into is we call it MEP, mechanical, electrical and plumbing. So it's generally called building services. So for example, this house now, from the start, even when the foundation, the architect has created a design, you have the builder, the civil engineer, they start construction, the electrical engineer, the service engineer, as they call us, also comes in to design the plumbing, the AC, the electrical, and what we also call extra low voltage. So that's what we do. So at times you see that I'm on a site, like I said, I was in Ede for like 2 years. So the duration of the construction of that project also, the services engineer must be constantly there. So it's not like in the past where you have people run surface wires everywhere. So as the wall is coming up, we have to embed pipes, PVC pipes, and run our cables in. So at the end of the day, you just see a socket. You don't see the cables, you don't see the pipes. The pipes are already called the conduit system. So I think what helped me to balance engineering and writing is the fact that I traveled a lot. My former company, if we got a job and it's outside Lagos, before they think of any other person, it's Jide. So my boss just, at times I get to the office, at times we're about closing 3 o'clock, we close 5, by 3, we just get, Jide, we just got a new contract, you are going to Anambra tomorrow. You get that kind of a thing. So I'm the guy that goes out and, does the outside Lagos jobs. So it also means that Monday to Sunday, I've got to be occupied. I'm away from family, I'm away from friends. So it's just the job and whatever I can make of the little time I have. One thing I've realized is traveling is education on its own, and it's a big inspiration. So 2 things. I get a project, I'm going to Abeokuta, for example. The first thing, if I'm going by road, what occupies me between Lagos and Abeokuta is I'm reading. I'm taking the scene outside as the cars are passing, I'm looking, I'm reading. By the time I get to Abeokuta, first 2-3 days, I have a lot to write about. Because I've taken time to read, I've seen things on my way, I'm meeting new people, I'm seeing new culture. So I think rather than be an hindrance, the engineering and the traveling around it has aided my writing. So now it's about how do I create the time to now actually write. Yes, working outside Lagos also means that the waking up at 4:30 to join the traffic and get to work early is out of it. For example, I can tell you in Ede, if you step out at 8, that for example you want to get a charge card, you might have to walk a distance because they are not yet awake. The first place I realized that was Benin. I went to work in Benin and I was like, okay, I need to make a call. I think then it was still a bit, so it's not then where now when you can easily just buy star 737 or you go to your GT app or whatever app you use. So I stepped out at 7 thinking 7 is early enough, let me get to recharge card and maybe get some drinks, go back to my hotel room. And every shop I got to was locked. So it's not like, most places are not like Lagos. So one thing going for me too was that I don't have to, even when I wake up, because it's a habit for me, even from childhood, we wake 6 o'clock when I was a child to do family prayer. So even when I left home, got to Lagos and stayed alone, it became a habit. I don't need an alarm clock to wake me by 6. Then, now I got to Lagos, I realized I have to wake earlier. It's not in Lorry. So, working outside means I don't have to wake, or I don't have to go out as early as 4:35 where I do here. So I have time to actually wake at 4:30, pray and meditate. So my meditation also helps me build a lot of writing ideas. And by the time the day kicks off, I have 2-3 poem ideas. I go through the day, I do my engineering, break time, I could scribble 1 or 2 things and just keep on my notepad. Then when I get back home, I eat, I'm relaxed, I watch a movie, then go back to that and develop it. One thing that also helps me is maybe my style of writing. The fact that I just go for short poems. I believe, yes, you can say a lot in short lines and you have a lot to say. So you can write 100 points rather than put 100 things into one point. So it helped me a lot, so I could write ideas down and develop them when I think it's getting too long and I don't have time to I say this can go into another poem. It's not so strictly jointed to this. I can develop another idea and put it into another poem. So I think that helped a lot. It helped me a lot. There's a Storm in My Head. It's actually my first book. Yes, 2017. And for that, I would say there was really no big idea behind it than the fact that for more than 7 years before then, I wanted to publish. Whereas I think it's the dream of every writer to have a published work out there. So for years before that 2017, I'd been looking for ways to publish. So There's a Storm in My Head was more like just a collection of some of the poems I've written over the course of my writing experience that time. So I just looked for a way to curate it in such a way that it tells the story. And there is really nothing we write about here that our environment does not influence. The fact that what we go through as Nigerians, our experience with the government, our experience with our employers, our experience with the police and all that. So I was just like, okay, these are the poems I've written over time, and I think There Was a Storm in My Head went through a lot of abortions and rebirths, and it was a lot of, it was more like a big, I give birth to it, it dies, renewed, and so I renamed it a lot of times. The last one I was just reading through, and one of the poems, the line came, it's part of the poem, and I just felt, okay, this can actually be the title of the collection. So I actually renamed the poem to have that title. Then I started looking at, okay, what poems will tell the story of what I was trying to create. So you see me start the book with There's a Storm in My Head, and I ended it with There's Still a Storm, but you get, and the storm has not ended though, so expect more books. That's the kind of idea. So I also, I like to, whatever it is, tell a kind of story. And if you notice my style of writing, I love, even when everything seems to go in all directions, I love to have a flow. I love to have a pattern. So I'm not talking of the sun and somehow from sun I just jump into rain. There should be a connection. You get? That's how I. So even when I write my books, the sequencing, the arrangement has to tell a story. So you see, There's a Storm in My Head. The first chapter, there's a storm somewhere. I can't really recall. There's a chapter that talks about there's a storm in my bed, or there's a storm in my loins, and that chapter just had to do with love poems and erotic poems. There's a one that talks about there's a storm, like the nation. So he just talked about Nigeria and everything I perceived as a storm. So for There's a Storm in My Head, there was really no grand idea behind it, but the fact that I just wanted to be heard. I want people to read me, and so it was more like an introduction to Jide Badmus, the poet. Then scripture, like you rightly mentioned. Well, scripture seemed to now be that book that kind of defined me. I still refer to it. So that's 2018. This is 2023. And after several books, I still refer to scripture as that book that it tasked me, and the deliberateness behind it still even makes me marvel. Okay, like I said, I don't sit down to say, okay, I want to write a book. So in the next 2 weeks, I want to write a manuscript. and that's when I start writing like 100 poems or no. I ensure that when I'm writing, there's a pattern to it. So for example, today is Monday, for example, and I'm writing a poem about the police, Nigerian police, and brutality, for example. I tailor all my writing this week or even this month to one way or the other, irrespective of what they are saying, thematically, to kind of revolve around that, such that when I'm ready to have a manuscript, I have several poems from which I can pick. And by the time I'm telling the story, it's not disjointed. It might not fully or strictly align, but you look at it and you see elements of, okay, this is the thing, this is what this guy is driving at. So when I think one day I just posted on Facebook, say, okay, what do you guys think I should title my next book? You know, I'm a bit playful when it comes to Facebook. I used to be anyway. I used to be. Right nowadays, the way social media is, you have to be a bit careful before anybody just cancels you. So, but I was very playful back then. So I just asked, what do you think should be the title of or what do you think will be the title of my next book? And I was getting a lot of responses. People were just playing around. There's a storm in my bed. You get that kind of a thing. So someone said the storm is over. No, the storm is just starting. And it was then I felt, okay, I actually need a new book out there. And some of the things that have been recurrent, when you talk of discussions around literary writing, is the fact that I write a lot of erotic content, and you see the religious part of things. You see discussions like, a Christian should not write this, or all poets are going to hell, or those who write erotic stuff are agents of the devil and all that. So I'm like, okay, this is a part of us that we shy away from. There was one thing I wrote one time. I said, poets and writers compare everything to sex. It makes sex a metaphor to a lot of things, but sex itself. So we want to talk about sex, but we don't call it sex. We don't want to talk about sex. We want to mask it in metaphors. But we want to talk about every other thing and, find ways to, innuendos, refer to, subtly talk about sex. So I feel and I felt it was part of our culture as Africans, as Nigerians, as Yorubas, that there are things we feel are not up for discussion in public. And that's what, I'm a rebel. I think you wrote a review of scripture then, and something like that came up. I'm a rebel when it comes to writing. So if everybody is writing and they are saying white, I'm not going to write until I see black, until I see red. So I can come from that angle, and you get people also talking and seeing things that should actually be seen. Yes, we might be seeing white and everybody might be right, but everything is not always plain black or white. So if anybody is not talking of, even if it's a dot of red, I look for that dot and speak about it. So from time, my writing has been rebellious, so to say. So I'm like, if we do everything, you go out there, you see kids without dress, in pants, rolling tires around. You see people who only have one room, have 10 kids. So we're having sex, and we're not talking about it. You get? We can't even talk of family planning. We can't even talk of, contraceptives publicly. A pastor wants to speak on the pulpit and cannot mention sex. He's looking for a polite way to talk about it. You get? So it was one thing that, okay, how do I incorporate this into my book? So I'm looking at sensuality, and I'm looking at spirituality. And I'm like, I'm a Christian. So I'm like, God created us. He made us this way. So if He made us sexual beings, and we think about these things, and we practice it, so it means there's a reason we are like that. And we should not shy away from nature. That is nature. And why are we hiding? Why are we not talking about it? So I was looking for a connection between spirituality and sensuality. And I was also looking at it from the angle that, yes, we are mortals. We are created, especially for people who are spiritual, we are created by a higher being. But we are on our own levels to God's. We create things. As a writer, I create stories, I create poems. So it's more multi-dimensional in the fact that, okay, I'm looking at the spiritual side of man. I'm looking also at the sensual side of man. I'm now looking at man too as a god. So I was looking at ways. It was difficult. How do you conceptualize this and put it into relatable images and things that people out there will read and be able to relate with? So if you see the first poem on the book, it's I think it's titled God, and it was more like, say, the whole idea about it is, in the morning or anytime I stay in front of the mirror and I look in the mirror and I see God. I think before I started writing for scripture, I was on a job in Abuja. So most times when I go for new projects like that in a new place or outside Lagos, I try to find old friends that stay there, so that I can just find people at, okay, weekends, I'm done with work, I can relax, catch up with people. So I found this friend. We attended the same church in Ilorin, First Equa Church in Ilorin. So I got in touch with him and we agreed to meet. Now he is what we call, he's a consultant, someone you can refer to like a life coach, kind of career coach. And so we got talking at the eatery we met at, and he asked me a question. He said, Jide, he's been reading my works, but what's in you? Like I said, when you sit with someone with like passion, you get into depth of discussions. So he was carried away he just got carried away by his own. So his profession became his life. And even in our discussion, he's trying to, be that consultant, be that life coach. So he said, Jide, what would you write? And you would not put your name on it. Maybe I just write a poem, I didn't sign it, and someone in America or someone in India would see and read and say, this sounds like Jide. And he said, you might not answer me now, but think about it and move your niche towards that and focus on that. That's what he said. So I got home, it got me thinking, Jide, what would you actually write? And a friend would just see and say, this sounds like Jide. So, like my normal self would do, I posted on my WhatsApp status. I think I did on Facebook too, I can't remember. I was saying, romance, romantic. No, I'm not a fan of romance. I don't read romantic novels. That's the funny thing. I like espionage, I like mystery, I like horror. So you see me reading Stephen King, Dan Kuntz. I like sci-fis and I like mysteries. So yeah, I was like, what are these people saying? Some were actually more direct, erotic content and all that. So I said, okay, I shouldn't play with what these people are saying. So I actually also went back to my works, my poems, my stories, And I saw that even when I was not intending to sound sensual or erotic, my images, my metaphors, they were that way. So I just felt, Jide, just go with this. So I just embraced what it was. It came freely. It comes easily. So why fight it? At that time, I even wrote a short essay. Because the funny thing is, around that time, 2016, 2017, 2018, I wrote a lot of short essays I had a blog running then. So I constantly write weekly. I was running a short story series too. Or an erotic series anyway. So I wrote one short essay. I say Sex on the Rooftop. I think there was this movie where there was a sex scene, a Nigerian movie, and people started shouting, say, no, we are copying Hollywood, we are doing this. So I was like, what's the hypocrisy? Most of you guys watch, then it was Ghanaian movies that were showing all those things then. You watch all these Ghanaian movies, you hide in your room and watch them. So why you watch Eyes Wide Shut by what's this popular guy's name? Tom Cruise, and you watch all the sex scenes. But when Nollywood tries to do something small, you start shouting. So I had to write Sex on the Rooftop. Yeah, these are the things we do. Imagine we have a camera and it beams to the world what we do in the corners of our room, That was the idea behind it. So it foiled what I wanted to do with scripture. So we are spiritual beings, yeah, but we are also physical beings. And we must find that balance. That was what that scripture. Obaluaye was last year, as 2022. And I would say Obaluaye is the first book that I had that wasn't self-published. So it's a small press, but it's purely traditional. So it means I did not, apart from contributing my manuscript, I didn't pay any money to get it out there. So it was more for me. It was a good thing. It was one of the things we all looked forward to have people appreciate our work and want to invest in it. So, like I said, There's a Storm in My Head was self-published by. So that means I paid for it, but it was published by WRR. That's Samson. Scripture was by Savage. That's Swedi. They are friends. We're all friends. So, in between, I just had chapbooks in digital forms, then on Amazon, so that people can also get. Obaluaye, like I said, is the first book that a publisher picked up and was ready to risk his money to get out there. And Obaluaye was more about, we had just come out of the COVID season, the pandemic season. Everybody, it was a massive hit on Earth, on humanity. We had not witnessed something of that magnitude or nature in a long while. So many people alive had not witnessed that before. I'm not sure I had witnessed any form of plague from when I was born till 2019-2020 period. So Obaluaye was more about plague and our quest for healing. And Obaluaye is a Nigerian, is a Yoruba god. Some also is also referred to as Sokono. And most of Yoruba gods are two-dimensional. It's the same way we refer to the Bible as two-edged sword. So most Yoruba gods are two-dimensional. Like Obaluaye, for example, we call it the god of plagues, but it's also the god of healing. So, so when Well, from stories we've read and all that, when there's a plague in the village or in a community, what they need to do is they believe Obalwaye is, the gods are angry. So they find a way to appease Obalwaye. He's also the one with the antidote. So that's the way So I was looking at how, everything was. We had gone through an emotional period. People had lost friends, people had lost family. And I was looking for a way to also address that. And I'm like, okay, how well? Because also, for most who know me and the kind of things I write, I put a lot of positivity and optimism into my writing. I find myself writing about healing a lot. Hope is a key element in what I write. So right now I wanted to write about pain. But how do I also balance the pain with, the quest for healing? Was how, okay, Obalwaye is a god of plague, it's a god of healing. That's the perfect metaphor for the message I was driving at. So that's how that title came. And the title came and I started looking at, okay, in our lives, in my life, in the community, in the society, what are those plagues that, apart from that fixed plague of that specific plague of COVID and what happened at that time, over a stretch of 100 years, what has been the plagues, on humanity? What have been the plagues on, the Nigerian community? What are the personal plagues, the personal pains people are going through individually? So, holistically, I wasn't just focusing on COVID-19. I was now looking at everything, I'm looking at plague as a metaphor, looking at pain as a metaphor, and looking at, okay, as an individual, what are those things that plague us? As a nation, what are those things that plague us? Life itself, how does it relate to this? How does it take plagues and healing? And I look at it, the sum of it all, there is no death if there's no life. So everything is dual. It's life and death. So it's birth and death. The in-between still stands on the fact that you're either fighting to stay alive or you are ready to end it all. So it's life, death, the in-between is on both. So everything I did in Obalwaye, or I wrote about in Obalwaye, had some form of that philosophy in it. The beginning, the end, and how we manage the in-between. Okay, so I presently I'm an editor poetry editor for Conceal magazine. I run my own writing and publishing brand to Inspired Energy, and so practically I'm the editor there. Then I used to be an editor for Aero Gospel magazine, the poetry editor. We had Kim on fiction, we had Ace, and we had Oris, Funshaw Oris on that end. But for now, it's just Conceal magazine. And the experience of editing. Editing is a big task. For me, it's something I enjoy doing because it's easy to. I think the easiest part of writing is actually what many would call first draft. It's just pouring down the idea, putting the idea on paper, and to get to a level whereby you can also edit for others is something you must have practiced often and often on yourself. you must be very critical of your own output, of your own writing, and be patient enough to, you know, dissect and look at all the workings of what you have, the work you have presented out there. The challenges of editorial works, especially when you're an editor for a magazine or a journal, or you are calling for submission for anthologies. The challenge is the fact that, especially for someone like me, you know so many people associate with you, and you find yourself, I know people who actually got angry with me or stopped speaking to me or picked up a grudge with me because I did not accept their works, their poems when they submitted, whether for Eru, Gospel, or for Conshio magazine, or for the 3-4 anthologies that I've produced. So yes, there's that part of friendship, and there's that part of being professional, having a standard, having what you want the magazine to read like, what you want the anthology to, the standard you want the anthology to have, the quality of works you want to be presented, and the fact that you know that people are in different phases of their career. Some are just starting, some are growing, some are at the mastery level. So yes, to a large extent, you see potentials in some pieces and you feel, okay, we can work on this minimally with the writer and make it good, so you accept. For some, you know that we are not going into in-depth or total overhaul of poems or fiction works. So this is a no-no. And it's not really an indictment, it's not really a judgment on the poet that has submitted his work. It's just more like, this does not fit into our plan right now, or this anthology, or we are looking for something different. I know, I think editors are like the most hated set of people because we reject more than we accept. So imagine you have 100 submissions and you just want to pick 12 works or 15 for that journal, for that issue, for that edition. So you can imagine you are taking 12 people in, you are rejecting 88. So I say it's on a jovial level, but some take it that serious. I've over time realized some just go, we grew apart, some just get distant, and by the time you ask one or two people, you see that they've spoken about their grudges, about you not accepting their it's funny, there's this I also I'm a mentor for Spring NG, and it's a yearly, so we mentor younger writers. There's the poetry part, there's the fiction part, there's the non-fiction part. I'm part of the poetry mentors, and there's this guy that Dio was I think he should be my second, so I've done 5 years in the Spring mentorship, and he's my second mentee, and I can't stop talking about him in the sense that he's like sometimes I believe poetry is hard to teach, and so I have a peculiar approach to it, but I don't want to delve into that now. But he's one person that I thought maybe he would even drop off in the middle of the 6 weeks program because I showed him hell. But this guy is so dogged, like he comes back. Okay, so every week You have reading assignments that your mentor gives you. You have the one that's, we have the manual that we use. So we have assignments from the manual that also leads to contest. So you must submit at a particular point. So if it was the assignment for your mentor, it could be a bit flexible when you submit it. But the one for the program itself, you have to hand it in at a particular time. So there was one he was supposed to hand in, and he gave to me, and I went through. He was supposed to hand in tomorrow morning now, and he gave me this evening, and I tore the work apart. As in, I scolded him. What have I been teaching you? You get what? I've talked about this thing severally. I tore the work apart. And in my own mind, so I'm like, hey, this guy will not be able to submit. I don't know how the guy did it. He went back, he wrote it, gave it to me, I looked at it, I said, you should submit. And it was that week he won the best work for. So every week we choose the best work, the winner of the contest. That work won his best work for that week. Why I had to refer to him because I wanted to say that in all my call for submissions, and since then it's been I've been a constant mentor to him. But in all my calls for submissions, in the anthologies that we have published, all of his submissions, I didn't even know. He gets rejected. The day he told me, I was just laughing. Because in my mind, I thought maybe he just didn't. I never even thought about it. At times, even if I thought about it, I thought maybe he did not submit. But I realized that he was submitting for each of those calls and he got rejected. But what I'm driving at is the fact that this did not stop him because he has a goal. He believes I'm someone he can learn from and he's learning a lot from. And that's what he's just looking at. So it's more like saying you will get rejected. That's the essence of that's life generally. Everything that occurs on the big stage of life is also what occurs, also what happens in our small sphere of writing. You have trials, many trials at a lot of things. You will fail at more than 80% or 90% of those things, but you will get your wins. Those failures should not define you. Those failures does not mean you are not good. Even as I am, I write and I sometimes ask myself, Jide, are you even sure? I question my own quality by myself, but I never look down at myself. I make myself my sole competitor. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to write a poem today that is better than what I wrote yesterday. I'm trying to be a better person today than who I was yesterday. So editing too, that's the focus. Whether at the point of submission, review, and sending out acceptances or rejections, or at the point of actual editing, whereby you look at the work, see how the images fit, look at the grammar, look at the mood, look at the measure of emotions. Are you shouting too much here? Are you too stoic here? You get everything has to be balanced, and that's what editing does. And for me, I believe one way or the other, people out there deserve to get new works often and often and often. And so that's the good thing with the journals. So Aero Gospel for now is not operating. I don't know, hopefully it might come back. But Inspired will try as much as possible to do call for submissions at least periodically. So the first anthology that Inspired NG released was Vowels Under Duress, and it was more about, so this was what pushed the idea. Like I said, my own kind of writing leans so much towards entertainment and relaxation. I want something people can read, at leisure, when even after the stress of work, and they won't feel burdened. Then what actually pushed me into writing poetry full time is the fact that, like I said, my brother, then I looked at the fact that all the poetry I read in secondary school as texts for exams and all that, they were in a form of way that made it look difficult. It felt like a difficult art. It felt like an art that is just for a set of people. And I'm like, if we are watching movies and people are reading novels and it has a wider audience, what says poetry should be rigid? So that's what informed my kind of writing, the fact that, let me get witty, let me get jovial, let's infuse some sort of humor and all that into our writing. Light poetry, so to say. So I felt, okay, if I have that with my personal works, I could do a bit of more contribution to the society with my anthologies. So Vows Under Duress was more about the society and people that don't have voice, people that have been silenced. So talk about boys and like how they say boys, expectation on boys don't cry, boys don't do this and don't do that, and how even young boys are being abused, molested, how young boys are turning overnight into fathers in sense of responsibility, not even like giving birth already, because maybe they have fathers that are irresponsible, or they are orphaned at a young age, have to provide for their siblings and their moms and all that. So that was what. Then even people that are generally abused, maybe you've heard of stories of people in churches, even boys that serve at the altar and all that, read of. So we went into religion, went into the society as a whole, police brutality, so everything where I felt people were being silenced. That was what Vows Under Duress addressed. So that was the actual first anthology. Then in 2021, we had How to Fall in Love. Okay, so as I have said, I'm more of a sensual, so erotic poems, love poems, there are things I look at. So, and had How to Fall in Love. Then the one that was also very important was Today I Choose Joy. At that period, there was a lot of depression amidst writers. There were a lot of suicide then, and there were a lot of controversies about arguments back and forth about how some feel suicide is not, depression is not something that you can just get out of. So there's those that sympathize and empathize, and those that some feel were not, how do you call it now? That maybe they were indifferent about it. But what my own concern was then was the fact that what amidst the writers, what in the society was causing, why was it rampant in the midst of writers? So I had Today I Choose Joy. If you are a Nigerian and you write, I think what you write, however it is, has elements of Nigerianness in it. And I think whether it is Nigerian enough or not is the secondary thing. It's a very secondary thing in the fact that what is your goal as a writer? And I say this, everybody is not your audience. As long as you find your audience, as long as your audience finds you, leave the critics to say whatever they like. It is their job. They will write essays, they will analyze works, If it's constructive, pick what is good there and imbibe, learn if you have to. But critics should also, I think I'm moving away a bit, but I'll come back to it. Critics should also work harder to understand writers. I can't critique your work if I don't soak myself in your work, if I don't get the ideology behind if I don't understand what you stand for. So you don't take one of my books and just read it and on the surface just believe you can tear it down or break it down and think you can get to the essence. Not likely. I'm sure even if you go through all my books and you still sit down and talk about it, you will not still exhaust what actually informed. And the good thing I target with my writing is that such that everybody can pick something and have something to say. So 10 people might say different things about what I've written to a reasonable extent. Separate the personality and political affiliations and all that from the person's work, especially where they don't intersect. Yes, there are times your ideology, your politics and everything, they show in your work. So as long as you are not critiquing the work from the point of view of analysis, and I don't think we should concentrate on all this. They are the least of what I look out for anyway. Let's enjoy the talent out there. Let's see how we can improve and tell good stories. If you feel there's a Nigerian story not being told, tell it. That's what I owe the society. That's what I owe myself. If I feel there's a part of our lives, of our society, of our story that nobody's telling, I'm not calling everybody out, I'm telling it. So I think for me that's my take on the Nigerianness of the thing. There's one thing I say. I think most times that's a phrase I repeat so often because I get so many people. I have so many people looking up to me in the industry, so to say. And I can say I'm one of the few, at least, elderly ones. I'm still a very young person anyway, but I'm still one of the elderly ones that relate so much with the younger writers. And to a very large extent, many people have access to me. So I find myself day in, day out giving advices. So when it comes to this kind of discussions, sometimes I remember what I told someone. I'm like, okay. And I find myself repeating things often because I'm addressing different people. So I find myself repeating that phrase, saying, I usually say this, or I once said this. But my advice for writers, young writers and poets, is that there's this thing I said about myself and about having read so much as a young boy. I was telling a friend 2 days ago, I said I read the family dictionary. We had 2 dictionaries at home, and I read both dictionaries into tatters. I read them into shreds. I will be holding the dictionary and reading, and my mom will be like, oh my dad, who reads a dictionary? What are you reading? It's not as if I'm reading a Bible or a novel. You are reading the dictionary, for God's sake. So nowadays I find myself writing or speaking, and I say something, I say a word I've never used in my life in my writing, and somehow I know it's right. I don't go to check. I finish writing. Then when I've read, edited, then I go, this word I used, am I even sure it's? Then I check, and it sits perfectly. So reading, a lot of times we don't know. It doesn't work for now. It works for so much later. I tell people, if you do primary school and you do up to JSS3 and you drop out, there's really and you cannot speak at least that English up to the sense that people will understand you and you can express yourself confidently, that means something else is wrong, because you don't really learn new way of speaking even after primary 6, but let's even say JSS3. So it's the same thing as a writer. Like I said, reading leaves a deposit in you. What I had read as a child, to a large extent, is what I'm using now. I tell people, you get older and yes, you get better at writing. As a young writer, you have a flurry of ideas. Your creativity is at the top, but it is finesse that you might lack. It is, nuance that you might lack. But as a matured writer, you have all that. You have mastery. You have control of, words and flow and emotions. But you might not get as much creativity as when you were younger. So at that point, you also balance it. But my advice basically is read, read, read. There's a place for reading as a writer. But there's also that place of writing. Write that rubbish. Write it. Write it. Don't be afraid to write. You write the rubbish, you edit the rubbish out of the rubbish. If it is small, that if you think that makes sense, share. One thing again, I say to people, share. Some are afraid of plagiarism and all that. I understand to a level. But also, what's the essence of writing and keeping them under your pillow? To me, that's right. Let people read you. You also need that confidence. You need people to give you feedback, and that also gives you a bit of a belief in yourself that, okay, this thing, there is actually something in it. And I think whatever our ambitions are, the main thing is, let's stay focused. You see people talking about imitating someone till you get and may I say, aspire to be like someone or to be better, but work on being original. Work on creating your own voice, and everything is more of practice. So you have to be dedicated, you have to be dogged. There will be rejections, but just keep at it. So read, write, I tell this to a few of I say, to get better at writing, try to read others and analyze them. Try to get the reason behind what they write. If you can be critical of yourself, you'll get better. So find that critic in you, find that writer in you, find that reader in you. Irrespective of what circumstances are around you, you have to go to work, you have financial issues, create that little time